When my wife told me she needed time to find herself, that she was going on a wellness retreat to clear her head, I wanted to believe her. After all, we had been through so much. Years of building a life, a home, a future together. But, deep down, something didn't sit right. The way she avoided eye contact, how her bags were already packed before we even talked. What I didn't know then, or maybe I just didn't want to admit, was that the retreat was a lie. The man she was running to wasn't a therapist or a spiritual guide. He was her lover. And the money she was using to fund her little awakening? My inheritance, left to me by my father. Everything I had left of him. Gone in the blink of an eye. She thought I was devastated, powerless. She thought she'd won. But what she didn't know is that I had already started playing a very different game. While she was lying to me, I was documenting everything. While she was planning her getaway, I was setting the stage, and by the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. She took everything, so I let her go. Straight into my trap. I found someone worth my time. My name is Miles Hartley. I'm a 44-year-old commercial architect in Savannah, Georgia, sitting in my home office staring at an email from my wife of 12 years. Kendra was supposedly at a yoga retreat in Arizona. The timestamp showed 11:22 p.m. her time. I've moved your inheritance into my personal account. It's better this way. Attached was a blurry photo, her and some guy with a beard, standing on a balcony, the sun setting behind them, wine glasses raised. Her smile looked different. Not like the ones she gave me. Not in years. I closed the laptop, walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared out at the backyard. The one we'd redesigned together 3 summers ago. The stone path. I'd laid it one slab at a time. She planted hydrangeas along the edge. All that effort, all that care, for a home she clearly had no intention of returning to. That money, $587,000 from my Aunt Elaine, wasn't just cash. It was a symbol of everything she'd done for me. The woman who took me in when my parents died at 14, who pulled night shifts at the hospital to pay for my college, who left me her life's work with one simple note: build something that lasts. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages asking if I'd seen the email. Just silence. She wasn't waiting on my reaction. She'd already moved on. And honestly, the signs had been there for months. Kendra's yoga retreats started getting longer. 2 days turned into 4, then into full weeks. Her phone stayed face down at dinner. New passwords, changed logins. Our conversations got shorter and colder. 3 months ago, she started asking strange questions about the inheritance, where exactly the money was, which accounts, whether we should diversify, where it was being held. I nodded, told her I'd think about it, but tonight I reopened the laptop, read that message again, and noticed what had been missing from the start. No greeting, no name, just a single sentence, and the theft. I typed 6 words in response. Thanks for letting me know. Then I closed the laptop, finished my water, and went to bed. Tomorrow would be a long day. But sitting alone in that king-size bed, I realized something that should have hit me harder, but didn't. I actually slept better knowing she wasn't coming back. What Kendra didn't know was that I had sensed something was off, months ago. The inheritance had never been where she thought it was, and her attempt to take it only gave me exactly what I needed. I met Kendra 15 years ago at an industry conference in Charlotte. She was launching her own wellness brand, looking for architects to help design her first brick-and-mortar location. I was 5 years into my career, hungry for projects that weren't just cold office buildings or endless parking structures. We got married within 3 years, built a life together in Savannah, where my firm's headquarters were based, and bought the craftsman-style home on Victory Drive with the big wraparound porch she always dreamed of. She never wanted children. Her choice. The business is my baby, she used to say. I understood. My buildings were mine. For 8 years, it worked. I designed. She grew her brand. Organic products, wellness retreats, a clean image. We traveled, hosted dinner parties, To everyone else, we looked like the picture of success, on paper and in person. Then my Aunt Elaine got sick. Cancer, fast, ruthless. I took a 6-month partial leave to care for her in Atlanta. Kendra visited twice. Hospitals depress me, she explained. I didn't push it. When Elaine passed, she left everything to me. The money was a surprise. I hadn't realized how carefully she'd invested. Over the years, it seemed Kendra was just as surprised. Suddenly, she took an interest in our finances in ways she never had before. We should put it toward expanding the business, she said over dinner one night. Her business, she meant. I need to think about what Elaine would have wanted, I replied. That was the first crack. Small but visible. More followed. Kendra started traveling more. Research trips, supplier meetings. Her calls got shorter. Sometimes I'd hear voices in the background that went quiet as soon as I spoke. When I asked who she was with, she brushed it off. Then one afternoon, while Kendra was away at a team retreat in Sedona, our neighbor Frank stopped by. Saw someone dropping her off last week. The comment was casual, offhand, a neighbor just making conversation. He had noticed the timing. I had just returned from a 3-day conference in Boston. I thanked him for the homemade bread his wife had sent over. I didn't ask questions, just filed it away in my mind. Then came the password changes. Banking. Apps that had always been open now asked for logins. Restrictions I hadn't seen before. Conversations about money started ending the moment I asked anything direct. One night, I found her in the backyard, on the phone, voice low. She laughed, in a way she no longer laughed with me. She mentioned it was someone from the studio, but I knew the person she named had left the business 8 months ago. I nodded. Didn't challenge her, just watched her pour more wine and shift the conversation. The foundation of our relationship was cracking beneath us, and only one of us was willing to admit it. 2 weeks before Kendra left for what turned out to be her final retreat, my firm's financial advisor called. He had been alerted to repeated attempts to access my trust accounts. The attempts were made using my personal details, but they hadn't passed the security verification. I asked which accounts, even though I already knew. They had tried using the last 4 digits of my social security number, but failed the security questions. I thanked him, hung up, and sat alone at my desk for a long time that night. Later, Kendra brought up the idea of simplifying our accounts. She said we had too many separate logins and passwords. She didn't meet my eyes. She suggested consolidation. Agreed. I said I would talk to the advisor. The next day I drove to Atlanta. I met with Rita Wallace, the attorney who had worked with my aunt for 2 decades, now representing me. I explained my concerns, no emotion, just facts. Rita listened carefully. Then she confirmed what I had hoped to hear. The trust structure protected the funds regardless of what happened in the marriage. And if someone had attempted to move or access them without authorization, the law was clear. It was financial fraud and it carried consequences. I nodded. The next step was to document everything. I also asked to have a monitoring system put in place, something that would alert us to any attempt to access, move, or change anything related to the trust. When I got home, Kendra was already packed for her retreat. She gave me a brief kiss before leaving, her attention already somewhere else. She mentioned she might extend the trip. She sat near the door, talking about how she needed to really dive into the practice this time. I helped load her bags into the car, watched her drive away, went back inside and opened my laptop. I didn't snoop through emails, didn't call her friends, didn't track her location. I simply accessed our shared cloud storage, where we kept basic household files, and opened the folder labeled Home Renovation Ideas, a project we had once discussed starting this year. I found exactly what I expected. Documents she had forgotten to move or delete, screenshots of my financial accounts, copies of bank statements, notes on how to initiate transfers, even a photo of a whiteboard with the inheritance total written out, minus 20%, next to a note, explaining the deduction as a transfer fee. She had been planning this for months. I closed the folder, walked through the house, looked at every piece of furniture and art we had picked together. the curated version of who we had once claimed to be. I felt something unexpected settle over me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was clarity. The betrayal wasn't shocking. What surprised me was how calm I felt. For the first time in years, I saw the marriage for what it had become. A transaction. One she was now ending because a more profitable opportunity had presented itself. That night, I slept in the guest room. The next morning, I started making calls. By the time her email arrived 5 days later, I had already set everything in motion. When I read Kendra's message, I didn't react. I waited exactly 24 hours before taking the first step. No emotion, no panic, just process. The first thing I did was contact Jerry and Rita. I forwarded them Kendra's email with a short note. Documentation requested. Both confirmed receipt. Neither asked for any further details. Then I called Thomas Webb, a divorce attorney. Rita had quietly recommended months earlier, back when this was still just a hypothetical. His secretary scheduled me for an afternoon appointment. By noon, Kendra had sent a message. She asked if I had received her email. I replied that I had. Minutes later, she asked if that was all I had to say. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to Thomas's office downtown. Rita joined us by video call. Thomas reviewed the documents she had sent over and explained the situation. The attempted transfer created a paper trail. There were multiple elements, now working in my favor. The funds were inherited. They had never been commingled with marital assets. The trust had been properly maintained, and now she had openly admitted to trying to access them without authorization. I asked what came next. Thomas advised filing for divorce immediately, citing financial misconduct. In Georgia, fraud overrides no fault. I signed the paperwork before, leaving his office at 4:30 p.m. On the way out, my phone rang. Her name flashed across the screen. She didn't greet me, didn't ask how I was. She told me I was being childish. She insisted this didn't have to be difficult. I agreed with her. Fighting would only drain more in legal fees. The money was already protected. I changed the subject and asked where she was staying. The pause. On the other end told me she hadn't expected that. She asked why it mattered. I told her I was just curious where home was now. She told me to focus, said we needed to talk about financial arrangements, that she was having her lawyer draft a settlement, said it would be cleaner this way. I asked for the lawyer's name. She told me it was David Lawrence, that he was already reviewing everything. I made a note. I told her that was helpful. I thanked her. She asked if I was even listening. Said, again, that this didn't have to be difficult. I reminded her she'd said that already. I kept my tone steady. Neutral. I acknowledged her concern for keeping it easy. There was another pause. She asked what I was doing. I told her nothing yet. Just getting used to the idea. I could hear her relax on the other end. She mistook my calm for acceptance. She told me it was for the best. Her voice softened. Said we'd been going in different directions for a long time. Said this way would be cleaner than dragging things out. I agreed. Cleaner was better. After we hung up, I called Thomas and gave him David Lawrence's information. Then I sent Kendra a single text, taking some time to process. We'll reach out when I'm ready to discuss details. Her reply came immediately. The warning came clearly. The papers would be ready by Friday. Friday, just 3 days away. The timing felt precise, almost calculated. At 6:00 p.m., Rita provided an update. The trust company had intercepted 3 new attempts to initiate transfers from the inheritance accounts. All attempts were blocked, carefully recorded, and flagged by the monitoring system. The metadata was thorough. IP addresses, login timestamps, failed credential attempts, all pointing to the same location. The source of the access was Scottsdale, Arizona, not Sedona. It was the same location that had sent the original email. But there was more. Rita noted prior suspicious activity. A login from my home network had occurred the month before, during which account details were accessed and protocols exported. Device identifiers and timestamp logs confirmed it. I ended the call and moved through a house that no longer felt like a home. Its warmth had drained away, replaced by cold evidence of what had been happening within its walls. In the kitchen, I opened a bottle of 20-year-old scotch we had been saving for an anniversary that would never arrive. I poured a drink, steady hands betraying none of the storm inside. Kendra had thought she was one step ahead, but she was mistaken. The trap she believed she'd set had never been real. The next morning brought a call from David Lawrence. He now represented Kendra in the separation. He conveyed the message that I was apparently open to a straightforward, uncomplicated settlement. The tone he used was careful, the words chosen, not to provoke. He mentioned a shared understanding of the situation, though he did not clarify what that meant. He referenced the division of assets, focusing especially on the inheritance. Supporting documents had already been submitted, including bank statements and transfer records from 3 months earlier. Additional confirmations were said to be on the way from the bank, supposedly validating her claims. I listened without interruption, keeping emotion out of my voice. I asked whether he had reviewed the full structure of the inheritance, the irrevocable trust, the legal protections, the clear separation from marital assets. If not, he would soon realize the critical difference between what had been claimed and what had actually occurred. The silence that followed revealed enough. The picture was shifting, facts replacing fiction. The illusion she had presented was unraveling, and with it any legal advantage she had imagined. Everything was now documented, verified, and moving in one direction only, toward resolution on terms she had not foreseen. The warning came clearly. The papers would be ready by Friday. Friday, just 3 days away. The timing felt precise, almost calculated. At 6 p.m., Rita provided an update. The trust company had intercepted 3 new attempts to initiate transfers from the inheritance accounts. All attempts were blocked, carefully recorded, and flagged by the monitoring system. The metadata was thorough. IP addresses, login timestamps, failed credential attempts, all pointing to the same location. The source of the access was Scottsdale, Arizona, not Sedona. It was the same location that had sent the original email. But there was more. Rita noted prior suspicious activity. A login from my home network had occurred the month before, during which account details were accessed and protocols exported. Device identifiers and timestamp logs confirmed it. I ended the call and moved through a house that no longer felt like a home. Its warmth had drained away, replaced by cold evidence of what had been happening within its walls. In the kitchen, I opened a bottle of 20-year-old scotch we had been saving for an anniversary that would never arrive. I poured a drink, steady hands betraying none of the storm inside. Kendra had thought she was one step ahead, but she was mistaken. The trap she believed she'd set had never been real. The next morning brought a call from David Lawrence. He now represented Kendra in the separation. He conveyed the message that I was apparently open to a straightforward, uncomplicated settlement. The tone he used was careful, the words chosen, not to provoke. He mentioned a shared understanding of the situation, though he did not clarify what that meant. He referenced the division of assets, focusing especially on the inheritance. Supporting documents had already been submitted, including bank statements and transfer records from 3 months earlier. Additional confirmations were said to be on the way from the bank, supposedly validating her claims. I listened without interruption, keeping emotion out of my voice. I asked whether he had reviewed the full structure of the inheritance, the irrevocable trust, the legal protections, the clear separation from marital assets. If not, he would soon realize the critical difference between what had been claimed and what had actually occurred. The silence that followed revealed enough. The picture was shifting, facts replacing fiction. The illusion she had presented was unraveling, and with it, any legal advantage she had imagined. Everything was now documented, verified, and moving in one direction only, toward resolution on terms she had not foreseen. The necessary documentation was on its way to the opposing counsel. After the call, I drove to Tostone Bank, the institution where Kendra and I had held our joint accounts for years. Harold, the branch manager, greeted me warmly. The same man who had helped us refinance our mortgage 2 years earlier. I explained the need to review recent activity on all shared financial accounts. He ushered me into his office and began pulling records. As the data loaded, his expression began to change. He scrolled through the transaction history silently, the tension in the room building. Over the last 3 months, the withdrawals had grown. Small transfers at first, then amounts large enough to raise red flags. The final figure reached $47,000 just 2 weeks ago. The money had been steadily moved to an account I didn't recognize. The destination account wasn't affiliated with Brightstone, where we held most of our personal savings. Instead, it belonged to a different institution, Northern Lakes Credit Union. I had never heard of it. Harold printed the transaction records for the last 6 months without hesitation. As I waited, my phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. His tone, previously calm, now felt urgent. Something had changed. The pieces were coming together. That unknown account at Northern Lakes had been opened 8 months earlier, under Kendra's name exclusively. The address attached was for an apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona. Clear evidence of intent. When totaled, the unauthorized withdrawals amounted to $178,250. She had been laying the foundation for her exit long before she sent that email, and she had done it while still pulling from our shared resources. Back at Thomas's office, we went over the banking data in detail. It wasn't just the money, it was the method. The calculated timing, the concealment, the confidence she'd never be discovered. As we reviewed, Thomas's assistant stepped in with a new call. David Lawrence had received the documentation. His voice, once firm, now reflected uncertainty. The inheritance wasn't what he had been led to believe. He acknowledged discrepancies between what his client had claimed and what the legal documents revealed. The structure of the trust, its separation from marital assets, its security, had changed the landscape entirely. The realization was beginning to set in. Everything Kendra had tried to construct was built on assumptions that had just collapsed. Thomas didn't gloat, but his stance was clear. The case now had both legal merit and supporting evidence beyond any reasonable dispute. After the call, the office felt quieter than before. I sat back, absorbing the shift. The facts no longer needed argument. They now stood on their own. The unraveling began swiftly and with precision. By the end of the day, her attorney would no longer represent her. No respectable legal professional would want their name attached to what was unfolding. The withdrawals from our shared accounts were now being meticulously compiled, every transaction mapped out. The apartment hidden away, the new bank, the trail of digital footprints. All of it pointed to intent, not error. And soon, it would be laid out plainly before a judge. The realization sat in my chest like weightless gravity, invisible, yet crushing. This wasn't a reckless impulse born from emotion. It was a slow burn, a deliberate dismantling of trust, executed over late dinners and weekend trips. While I chased deadlines and designed buildings, she had been designing an exit. The questions no longer revolved around betrayal. They revolved around blindness. How had I missed this? Or had I just refused to see it? There was still one detail I couldn't shake. I needed to understand the full picture, not for revenge or courtroom leverage, just to complete the puzzle of my own history. To see clearly the life I had once believed in. The name, the presence, the truth behind the blurred photograph. There was a man involved. But more than that, there was a timeline. And timelines tell stories no one wants to admit out loud. That evening, a courier arrived like punctuation at the end of a sentence. Inside the envelope was a withdrawal letter from her now former attorney. A neat package, printed, signed, carbon copied. Attached was a short message from my legal team. The first domino had fallen. My phone lit up moments later. Her name filled the screen over and over. Messages came next. Angry, accusatory, confused. I let the noise pass like weather. Later that night, an email arrived from Rita. The trust company had completed their internal review. The report detailed every unauthorized access attempt, dates, times, IP addresses. None had succeeded, but every try was recorded. Their legal division was now involved. The tone was neutral, procedural, but beneath it, I could feel the gravity shifting. What had started as personal now had criminal implications. There was nothing required from me at that moment. The machinery was in motion. I sat with that knowledge under the soft kitchen lights, letting it settle. The home felt quieter than usual, not lonely, just clearer. The walls held echoes of something gone, and in their absence the truth had room to expand. I forwarded the report to my attorney with a short note. Then I checked the time. It was just past 9. Another message came in. More of the same. Demands wrapped in confusion. Accusations meant to provoke. She claimed anger, not intention. A heat-of-the-moment mistake, not a scheme. But digital evidence doesn't lie. Motives don't vanish with apologies. And whatever this had been, it was no longer my burden to soothe or salvage. The story had moved on. The moment had come when silence no longer served me. The denial was hollow and the data didn't lie. Months of timestamps, login traces, and recorded attempts all pointed in one direction. She claimed nothing had been moved, but the system said otherwise. Her next message came with deflection, not clarity. I didn't reply with emotion. I responded with precision, knowing that facts always surface, regardless of who tries to bury them. The pieces were falling into place. A name ordinary and unremarkable emerged, Jason Berkeley. A simple online search turned up a neatly curated life. Yoga instructor, ex-financier, advocate of meaningful living. His timeline matched hers. His studio matched her retreats. Their images, sunsets, glasses of wine, matched the void she'd carved into our life. It wasn't jealousy, just curiosity. I needed a complete picture of the life I never knew she was building. The confirmation came from next door, casual and uncoached. Our neighbor had seen the man more than once, details lining up perfectly. The car, the beard, the frequency. No confrontation necessary, just observation. Documentation stacked quietly. Willing witnesses surfaced without prompting. There was no need for drama, just order. And with that order came control. The truth didn't need permission to be acknowledged. The tide shifted with a single call. She had secured one of the city's most aggressive litigators, a man known for turning marriages into battlefields. The request for an emergency hearing signaled her pivot to offense. Claims were made. Narratives were forming. But I didn't flinch. The arsenal on my side wasn't emotional. It was evidentiary. Every file, every folder, every log was quietly loaded and dispatched. That afternoon, the foundation cracked from her side. A package arrived at her new attorney's desk, sealed and complete. It contained no threats, no speculation, just verified facts. Bank records with dates, trust access logs with IPs, a notarized statement from a neighbor, a lease with her name on it, from an apartment in a city I'd never visited, even screenshots of her own digital fingerprints. By the end of the day, fiction had run out of room. The pressure broke first from their side. The call from her new attorney marked a shift, in tone, urgency replacing confidence. He had seen the evidence. The story they hoped to tell no longer held weight against documented facts. A settlement was now on the table, framed as fairness. She would keep what she had already taken, make no further claims, and walk away. But I wasn't looking for clean. I was looking for closure. The counteroffer was simple. Half of what had been taken would be returned. A non-disclosure agreement would be signed, protecting my name, our story, and the truth I had unearthed. In return, I would walk away from any criminal or civil pursuit. It wasn't weakness. It was control. No court. No scandal. Just the clean finality of boundaries being drawn and enforced. The courthouse was quiet that morning. The emergency hearing she'd hoped would flip the script never happened. Instead, she found a private room, a waiting attorney, and a thick folder labeled only with her name. I stayed behind glass, watching from a distance. She read, absorbed, faltered. Her face moved through stages: resistance, recognition, resignation. The performance ended without applause. The terms were laid out without flourish. A precise number to be returned. A legal barrier around what she could say, to whom, and for how long. No claims, no appeals, no loose ends. In exchange, a clean break and the freedom to rewrite her life without dragging mine into it again. The moment was sterile, but decisive. She signed the agreement, her posture stiff, her grip uncertain. I followed suit without hesitation. Then I handed over a separate envelope, quietly placed across the table. Inside were the remaining keys, access codes, passphrases, remnants of a life now divided. I offered her what little still belonged to her out of courtesy, not emotion. When her eyes searched mine for a reaction, she found none, just the weight of what she'd lost. She appeared unmoored, stripped of the certainty she once wore like armor. It had never truly been about the money. If it were, the solution might have been transactional, simple even. But betrayal on that scale always has deeper roots. As her attorney guided her to leave, she held the envelope tightly, eyes never returning to mine. The silence behind her said more than words ever could. Half a year later, the house on Victory Drive became someone else's beginning. Too many spaces echoed with a version of life I no longer claimed. A young couple fell in love with the porch, the flowers, the warmth baked into its bones. I let it go without ceremony and moved downtown to a space that felt like a clean slate. Smaller footprint, lighter weight. I learned that less doesn't mean lacking. Elaine's legacy became more than a memory. With Rita's help, I turned her gift into a foundation that gave others the chance she once gave me. The first scholarship went to a teenager whose passion for healing through design mirrored my own at that age. It felt right. Elaine would have smiled at the choice, proud, but not surprised. Her wisdom echoed in every decision made with intention, not impulse. One afternoon, sorting through the week's mail, I opened an unmarked envelope. No message, no return address, just a check for the exact amount Kendra still owed and a short line acknowledging the full weight of the debt. It didn't need a name. I carried it with me down to the river where old dreams had once been spoken aloud, plans for a shared future that faded long before the final goodbye. That evening I chose not to dwell in what had been lost. Instead, I prepared for what came next. A dinner, a conversation, a possible new beginning. The past didn't vanish, but it no longer defined me. The strongest answer to betrayal isn't destruction or bitterness. It's building something better with everything you've learned, not to prove anything, just to live free. And if you want more true stories that cut deep, challenge expectations, and remind us what it means to be human, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for being here, and remember, your story is powerful even if no one claps when you tell it.